What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. So lately I've been having a lot of conversations with my family and friends about money. So these videos have all kind of been around that subject, which it's fine because it all kind of ties back into that whole self-improvement vibe. But anyway, let's get right into it. In a sense, credit can be defined as a person's ability to borrow money with the knowledge that they'll have to pay it back later with interest. You can think of it as borrowing a cup of sugar from a neighbor, and when you pay it back, you'll give them an extra half a cup as a sort of thank you for letting you borrow it in the first place. You can think of a credit score, on the other hand, as a sort of report card for your credit, right? Your credit will be graded on a scale from 300 to 850, with 300 being the worst and 800 being the perfect score. Essentially what this credit score does is it gives lender a picture of how reliable you are, which can allow you to borrow more money with better rates, better interest, better terms. Now, as the title suggests, I'm 24 and my credit score is sitting somewhere around 820, I believe. So how did I do it? Well, I opened my first credit account when I was 18 years old. Now, this wasn't a credit card or anything like that. It was a credit account for a local tire shop. My brother was working there at the time, and he suggested that I get it open in case I needed to buy new tires, a car battery, just anything for my car, get some maintenance done. So I opened that about 6 months after I turned 18, and I didn't get my first credit card until shortly after that. So after I got my first credit card, the first thing that I did was I started using it for everything. An important thing to remember is that when I say use it for everything, I mean use it for everything that you need, right? I'm not saying because you have a credit card and you're not spending your own money, you can go out and purchase all sorts of unnecessary things. Instead, what I did was all of my necessary purchases I split up into sort of a 90-10, meaning I was buying 90% of everything I needed on my credit card and about 10% on my debit card. And because credit cards often have perks, meaning cash back, travel points, etc., I was using it a lot, so I was gaining those pretty quickly. My first credit card had cashback, so as I would build those points, I would use them to pay off my credit card, which leads me into my next point. The second thing I got into the habit of doing was paying off my credit card once a week. Now, this isn't absolutely necessary for everybody. A lot of people prefer to do monthly payments, which you can do, but I wouldn't recommend because of the interest. The one thing I would definitely say not to do is pay minimum payments, because these can hurt your credit history and it will also take forever to pay off. One great thing about paying your credit card off weekly is that it allows you to track your spending, which I've talked about in the past. It's a great habit to build. Now back to this interest topic, right? Interest rates are how credit card companies make money, which means they essentially charge you to use their money, right? Because that's what credit is at the end of the day. They're letting you borrow money and you're paying them back. But credit cards often have very high interest rates. I'm talking 20 to 30%. Now personally, I hate paying interest. I think as long as I've had a credit card, I've paid interest once in my life, which is kind of a funny story. I had to buy a laptop for college and I had just recently gotten a credit card. So I decided to put it on credit. The laptop was probably about $800 and I figured, hey, I can pay this off in a few installments. I wasn't going to do minimum monthly payments, but I figured I could do a couple of decent sized payments every month. I started off my first payment with about $50, so I had about $750 left on the card. A month later, when I went back in to check, I realized the interest rate had hit and the amount I had left had jumped up by like $20. Now that was crazy to me because essentially that $50 was cut in half and I had only paid $30 off of what I owed. And since then I realized that I never want to pay interest again, and that's why I pay it off every week. Now if you're interested in seeing how interest rates can affect credit card balances, I'll leave a link in the description to a calculator that I've used in the past. It's a pretty handy tool just to kind of get an idea of how much you'll end up paying if you're paying monthly payments as opposed to just paying off a card. Another great perk about paying it off is those perks that I mentioned, right? So because credit card companies make their money from interest, if you're not paying any interest, they're not making any money off of you, which translates into those perks that you're getting, whether it's cash back or travel points, you're getting them absolutely for free. Granted that the credit card doesn't have an annual fee, which starter credit cards usually don't, but as you get further into your credit history experience, you may end up having to pay for one. The last great thing about paying your card off once a week is that it will help keep your revolving utilization low, which leads me into my next point again. So revolving utilization is essentially what percentage of your credit limit you use. Now every card that you ever have is going to have a credit limit. For starter credit cards, it can range from $200 to $1,000. As you grow in credit history and experience, your limit can grow exponentially. Now the rule of thumb is to keep your revolving utilization below 30%, which means that if your credit limit is $1,000, for example, you'll never want to put more than $300 on your credit card at one time. Following this rule is kind of like a 2-in-1 because not only does it teach you good money management, but it also allows you to keep your funds low enough where you can pay it off pretty easily, right? You don't have to worry about trying to pay off your credit card for 2+ years, which can happen depending what your financial status is and how much money you end up putting on them. Now, for me personally, across all of my credit accounts, right, which is the 2 credit cards and the credit account at the tire shop, my revolving utilization is somewhere around 1%. Now, I know that sounds low, but my credit limits are pretty high. But even now, right, I don't spend a whole lot of money on a bunch of useless things. I buy what I need, and on occasion, I treat myself, which allows me to keep that utilization really low, which has helped boost my credit score. Now, everything I've just talked about, I had been doing for about 5 years. And because of that, my credit score slowly but steadily grew to about high 700s, and then it just kind of hit a stagnant point. It had been bouncing back and forth between like 780, 790 for like a year, until I realized that up to that point, all of my credit accounts were basically the same thing, right? 2 of them were credit cards, and 1 of them was basically a store credit card. Luckily for me, at the time, I was in the market for a new car. So I went and got one. Now, because I already had 5 or so years of credit history when I got there, getting the car was super easy. They ran my credit, I was approved. It took a few hours to do all the paperwork because that's dealerships. And I had a new car at the end of the day. And that's where credit mix comes in. So an auto loan is known as what's called an installment loan, which is essentially a larger loan that you're paying off over time. This one would be difficult to pay off all at once unless you have $30,000 to $40,000 just sitting around. And now that I'd introduced a different type of credit to my history, that's when my credit score finally jumped over that 800 mark and got me to where I am today. But even then, it wasn't until I had already been paying my car off for a few months that it reached that point, which is the next big factor in how I've reached a credit score over 800, which is time. Time is kind of one that there's no trick to. Sometimes you just have to wait it out, which is unfortunate because it will take time to build your credit score. But if you take something from my video and use any of the things I've just mentioned, you will get there in time. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, I've been talking to a lot of friends and family about money and credit and everything like that. And the reason why is because I've realized that credit is more important than ever. Chances are, if you've clicked on this video, you've realized how expensive everything has gotten. In 2023, a new car averages over $48,000. I live in Washington State, and here the average price of a home is over $500,000. That's $500,000. My point is that buying these big dream purchases is starting to become prohibitive, and even those that are making good income are having a difficult time being able to afford these things. So my hope for this video is that you will all have learned something that you can take on your credit journey that will help you build an 800 plus credit score, which will in turn allow you to get the best interest rates and the best loan terms possible so that you can afford a house someday, because damn. Anyway, that's the video, y'all. If you enjoyed it, if you found something useful, click here to watch my latest video. Click here to watch a video on how to stop living paycheck to paycheck, and I'll see you all next time.